Thank you. All right, so let's get started. Yeah, my name is Lorica. I am based here in, well, not here, but in Zurich since 7 years. I do UX design here, and I actually started out as a basically as a developer. I have a technical background, but I've always been interested in user experience and those things. So I mainly do mobile apps and apps with lots of functionality and things like that. So one of the things is I like skiing in my personal time. I'm not a good skier despite the fancy ski gear or anything. I have some pet projects that I'm working on. One of them is a time tracker called Jiffy. It's available on the Play Store, and it's basically the first Android app that I ever designed. In a way, that's a playground for me to be able to try out animations and other things. Since a couple of 2 months, I also have an actual pet, which is AG, who's over there. It takes up a lot of time at the moment, but it's pretty cool. I make things. I like to make things. I also like not just designing digital things, but also physical things. So I do 3D printing. I build animated lights. Yeah, animations. So that light up there is something that I built in a welding class, and it does this on the wall. Yay! So that brings us to animations and actually animations in user interfaces. In this presentation, we will look at basically a ton of examples of UI animations and how they can be used to improve the user experience of an app. Most of these examples are from fellow designers, and I found them on dribble.com, which is a place where when I need inspiration, I go there and I check animated GIFs and see, okay, what could we do? We will talk about two different kinds of animations. One is functional animations. That's transitions between different states in a UI, showing state changes, things like that. The second thing is more a visual treat. It's the delightful details, animated icons, little illustrations that throw around, etc. Both of these have positive impact on the user experience, but they have it in very different ways. But before we go into that, I want to talk about a problem that users face, and that's called change blindness. I don't know how many of you have heard of it, but I will show you an example. So change blindness is a phenomenon that occurs when a user is viewing a visual scene, and he will fail to detect changes that are happening. Like, if a picture is being presented, then a white screen comes in, and then the picture comes back, and something small has changed, like a tree is removed or something like that. To give you an example, I will actually show you how this works, and we'll see how you do in a test with this. So I will show you an example of the Rapperswil Christmas market, and we'll just switch to that one now. So pay close attention and see if you can spot any differences in the images. Anyone? All right. So it actually is quite a big change that I made to this image. So I will let you have a look at this one without the green screen in between. And it's so much easier. It's crazy that such a thing, like that the brain doesn't register it. And so this is a nice thing to be aware about. And but when looking at user interfaces, how is this actually relevant? What does change blindness have to do with apps? So for an example that I could think of is that lots of apps, they use external data. So something is being shown, then they connect to the server and download some new data, and then something else is being shown. It could look something like this example. You have some bars, you have a loading spinner, and then some other bars, because the data is for a different time frame, for example. Animations can actually help avoid change blindness. As you already saw, without the gap, the differences are easier to spot. But if we add a transition from A to B, it becomes even easier and clearer. Like this example, where loading is being done at the same time as we're displaying it, and then when the loading is done, we make a transition to the different state. So that's enough about change blindness. Now we're going to move on to functional animations. Functional animations, I would say, is a bit of a buzzword at the moment. For all of you devs out there, it's not functions and not... I was actually contemplating making the title of the talk functional animations, but then it's not the mathematical functions, but the functionality. So functional animations can communicate important information about the user interface. It can reinforce the hierarchy, how things are structured and relate to each other. It can transport users between different contexts, like from one screen to the next with a detail view to a list view, or the other way around. It can also communicate state changes, things that happens after a user has triggered an action, like communicating to the server, changing a state, and then getting back, and how that interface updates with that. In material design from Google, this is, they talk about meaningful transitions, and there's a lot of information about that, and some of the examples that I have will also be from there. So, first of all, let's have a look at an example transformation. From material, this is pretty common. You have a list view, you have a detail view, and the first thing to think about when you make an animation is think about these two states and then how you can transform it between them. Not what kind of cool animation could I add to make this look nice. So functional animations are there not just to look nice, but to bring meaning and help your users understand. So we keep it simple here. I will show you an animated example of this. When the user clicks the card, and it transforms into the detail view. You may have noticed the animation here is sequential, so you don't make too much changes at once. So we make the transition with the header first, and then the action button comes in, and that makes it a lot easier to process. Another example is if a user clicks some kind of primary action, like adding something, they need to enter a name or whatever it may be, they press the button, and a pop-up shows up for a dialogue. And that dialogue can then have that information, and if you can show that it came from this point, the user understands the hierarchy and how it's all connected better. And these things, in a more detailed example for a book reader, and this is from one of the examples from Dribbble, where they've used animations to reinforce the hierarchy in this reader. So you have a list of books, you have an intro to the book, and then you have start reading and the immersive read mode. And these animations, they just transition the user more easily. It's easy to follow. We move on to state changes. So animations can also be used to communicate a state change. Like this example that I made a couple of years ago. Before the time of Twint and Payment and all of those things, it was for a payment app, and the idea was that the user would scan a QR code, and he would know how much he needed to pay, and then he would have this button to press, and as he presses it, data is sent to the server. There's a wait state, and then there's a confirmation. And rather than changing the whole screen many times for this, we just change a part of it, and we make it with transitions and animations, so it's easy to understand. It's a delayed state change, this one, with the server, and I will show you the next one, which is an immediate state change for an on-off switch. It can also be used to improve the clarity in on and off switches. Again, example from Dribble. It's just kind of nice to play with these switches. Here's another example for a task app. And again, just the concept from Dribble, but it shows an immediate state change followed by a delayed state change, sequential animations, and item state changes to completed. So if you have a look, the user taps, the tick mark is shown, there's an animation, and then the list collapses. And when the list is done, it goes away, and there's a little message. And it all feels more fluid somehow. Imagine this without animations. Another example with a card view. There's immediate state changes and list responses to what happens when the user moves a card around. So a card was created, he moves it into the list. You see how the other elements in the list react to this movement. So, yeah, these animations here, they make it clear to the user what is really going on. But with all these animations, the more serious point, timing is very important. Users really don't like to wait for unnecessary things. So all the animations need to be short. They need to be quick. They shouldn't feel like the animations or the app is becoming slower from it. So this is an example from material design, and did the animation run? Yeah, so just quick animations. And not just saying that they should be quick, I actually have some numbers from material design that's really important, just that you get a sense for how fast these animations should be. Depending on what you're animating, there are different guidelines. So if an object is entering, you need 225 milliseconds for the user to be able to register it and for it not to feel slow. If you do a full screen transition with lots of elements that are changing, you have about 375 milliseconds. But then if the object is leaving, it's only 195. And the reason for that, at least this is the reason I think, is that when an object is leaving, it's like you're throwing it in the trash bin. You don't need to register the new object, you just need to see that it's heading in the general right direction, and then it's whatever, it's gone. But something that's really important is like the maximum length of a transition shouldn't be more than 400 milliseconds, because that's where the users start feeling that it's flow. Another important thing is easing of the animations. If you have a linear, like the movement of an object, if it's just linear, like with the no easing here, it has the same speed throughout. Whereas with easing, you add acceleration and deceleration, so in the start and the beginning, and that makes it feel much more natural. So these are actually crucial to make it feel natural. All right, so that's it for the functional animations. And now we will move on to delightful details. So delightful details are like animations and things that make the app just feel more interesting and more engaging. They actually don't need to be there necessarily, but they add an overall sense of quality in the app. Let's say you are faced with these two old Volvo Amazons. Which one would you rather ride with? You can't tell from the appearance of this car which one works and which one doesn't. But most people would assume the red car is more reliable because it has been cared for on the outside. Chances feel like they would be pretty high that it would also be cared for on the inside. And it's the same with user interfaces. And having these delightful details brings this polish to your app. So you can add animations where it's not expected. It will give your users a good feeling. But you need to work with your designers on this, obviously. But for some more examples. So let's have a look at delays in user interfaces. Another example from Dribble, loading spinners and loading indicators. Kind of unexpected that you could show error states and like the done state and everything, but it's a nice thing. It doesn't have to be dull. Here's an example that I made for a company here in Zurich. I would say their logo is the one up in the top corner. It's a pretty nice one. And I think the loading spinner doesn't have to be the standard one, does it? They do web-based things, so they have a lot of loading time involved. And here's what I did with that logo instead of a standard rotating loading spinner. So when they have to wait, you can actually keep them entertained. At least for the first time, it would be interesting. All right. Another neat example of just delightful detail would be this pull to refresh animation. I mean, imagine how many unnecessary reloads this kind of animation would generate. Users like to be surprised by details like this, but it has to be in places where it's not getting in the way of something else. Or have a look at this onboarding. Who wouldn't swipe through these a couple of extra times just because it's kind of nice? Another example of something I did was for an empty state. Like a couple of years ago, empty states were beginning to become populated rather than having just nothing and then a list, actually populating the empty state with something. I thought, yeah, static empty states, they're kind of boring. Why not do something with it? So I added an animation to the first screen of the app, and this is what the user would see, and why not? A nice detail. Okay, so then another super cute thing. This is, I can't quite categorize this actually. It's the app of a Chinese plant monitoring system. So you have little sensors, and they measure the soil temperature, the moisture, the fertilizer, and everything. The app obviously is all in Chinese. I got the sensors off AliExpress, but this app is super cute. So here, in this little illustration, they have these clouds coming in, and this little bee going out, and it's it's a bit of maybe cuteness overload. But yeah, so this is the detail view of the plant, and this is my orchid or something. And when they're loading data, they're showing this, and then they use it really cleverly because they change the state of the header when the data has loaded to show how your plants are doing. Yeah, my thumb isn't that green. But they're also like using these animations here to show that, okay, it's not enough sunlight. Doesn't say if it's at night or so, but yeah. Anyway, they use animations and they use these illustrations in a really clever way to communicate the changes. Okay, and actually this is, I believe, the last example. So this is one that I did, and this is for animated icons in my pet project. So these 3 icons just show when you pull the card, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's necessary having it, but it's, yeah. It's nice. I still, like, even though I designed it and I use the app all the time, occasionally I just open it and have a look. Okay, so moving on to the final notes, and well, basically, these animations, they may not be super simple to implement, but they also don't have to be overcomplicated. But as a designer, many of the animations that I've designed have actually been stored away in a drawer. Most of the ones I've designed are implemented in my pet project because there I have the possibility to prioritize them myself. It's more difficult persuading customers to prioritize spending time on making animations. If you have a business analyst or a project lead and you ask them or you give them the option, we could either work on the next feature or make animations. What's going to happen? So I would like to suggest to you as developers, try and include, I mean, if you want to work with animations, and I hope you do for your users' sake, because this is a really neat thing, but I would urge you to include animations already in the estimates. Make animations part of your next feature. Basically the same way that you hopefully do with testing. And I think that is the only way to actually get the time that you need in order to do this and not feel like you don't have time to do the animations. And then, of course, there's the other thing, which is not all of you get animations from your designers. Some of them, like me, have gotten tired of trying to do animations that actually never get implemented. But I would say challenge your designers. Ask them for animations. Many of us will actually thank you for it because it's a really fun thing to do. And many of the examples that I've showed today from Dribbble were like dreamt up by designers, and some may need some kind of tweaking in order to be implemented, especially when you look at different platforms and patterns. And here I would like to say for successful animations, you need to sit together with your designer and tweak it, because you can draw something up in a design tool for making animations, but then converting that into the real thing will always need this adjustment. You need to sit together for this. So if you take anything away from this, I would love it to be inspiration. Taking time in your estimates for animations, and sitting together with your designers to work on this. Thank you.
So one thing that always bothered me way too much, I think we've seen in your examples at the start, the loading circle, I think it's material design, but I saw it in the holo design as well, is slightly off center sometimes. Is this intentional? Is it just a mistake, or is it like, does it have some UX reason behind it? Because
you mean the loading spinner from material, or?
Yeah.
I actually didn't see that yet, but now I'm probably never going to be able to unsee it. I'll have to check. I don't know if there's a point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some other questions?
Hi, thanks for inspirational talk. The animations, I would like to ask if you can recommend some tool that we as developers can use to prototype, so we don't implement from beginning, but we just make quick and dirty sample to see how it looks like.
Yeah. So I use a tool called Principle in order to make the animations. It's a Mac app, but if you search for Principle, you will find it. It will allow you to have different art boards, and they managed to make this really, really easy. So basically, you have one element in the screen, and if it has the same name in the next screen, and you make a transformation to it, it will make the transition. And then you can, of course, add different parameters and drivers and things. And I got started with that in a day, so that's definitely a recommendation. Depending on the animation you want to make, of course, that's for transitions. But if you need to make an icon transition or something, that would not be the tool for it, because it's not vector-based for paths and things. For that, I use Adobe After Effects, which I don't recommend to anyone. It's such a pain. Yeah. But on that note, there's actually a tool from Roman Jurek that was released a couple of weeks ago to make the path transitions, which has all the small neat features that I used in After Effects in one web tool where you can.
Other questions? Or? Sorry.
How long does it take you to design one of those animations, like especially for the icon?
Okay, so that was for the pet project, and actually, even though I have a time tracker, I didn't check exactly how much time it took. But making a transition like that, maybe 3 hours, 3-4 hours with the tweaking and everything, you have it done.
You mentioned it is a little bit hard to sell it, to have it in the requirements to have this. Right? Do you have any courses for objective measurements, like A/B testing results or something that we can cite when we are trying to sell this?
I would have to get back to you with that, but there are studies on it, so definitely. But I can't cite them now. Not on animation versus not animation, unfortunately, no.
So, some question left? Oh, there in the back, yes.
Hello, I might have missed it, but the numbers you've shown for the animations, the enter ones and the exiting ones, they're based on some research? Is it like ad hoc, or is it based on your experience?
No, so they actually, I hope they are based on research because they are part of the material design guidelines. So you can read about these durations and guidelines for moving things around on the screen on on the material.google.com/motion. So the design spec for material has these, and that's where I got them from. And even though this was not specifically for material design and Android, I think users react the same way to delays and everything, so you can still use guidelines in other places as well.